Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Jessie's eyelids grew heavy as she struggled to focus on Nicholas's words. His deep, melodious voice seemed to fade in and out, like a radio station losing signal. She fought against the overwhelming urge to close her eyes, but exhaustion won out. Her head drooped forward, chin nearly touching her chest. Jessie? Nicholas's concerned voice pierced through the fog of sleep. Are you all right? She jerked awake with a start, blinking rapidly as she tried to regain her bearings. The restaurant came back into focus. The elegant decor, the soft murmur of conversation from nearby tables, and Nicholas's worried expression across from her. Oh my God, Jessie gasped, heat rushing to her cheeks. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I just fell asleep on you. Nicholas's furrowed brow softened, and a gentle smile played at the corners of his mouth. No need to apologize. It's been a long week, hasn't it? Jessie nodded, still mortified. She'd been looking forward to this date all week, meticulously choosing her outfit, a deep burgundy wrap dress, and spending extra time on her makeup and hair. Now, here she was, dozing off like a narcoleptic grandmother. I've ruined the evening, she groaned, burying her face in her hands. Nonsense, Nicolas said, reaching across the table to gently pry her hands away from her face. His touch sent a jolt of electricity through her skin. If anything, you've made it more memorable. Jessie peeked at him through her fingers. How so? Nicholas's eyes twinkled with mischief. Well, now I have a funny story to tell at our wedding. The word wedding made Jessie's heart skip a beat, even though she knew he was joking. They'd only been on a handful of dates, but there was something about Nicholas that felt different from anyone she'd dated before. Our wedding, huh? She said, playing along. You're pretty confident, aren't you? Nicholas leaned back in his chair, a playful grin spreading across his face. What can I say? I'm an optimist. Jessie couldn't help but smile. Nicholas had a way of putting her at ease, even in the most embarrassing situations. It was one of the things she liked most about him. Well, Mr. Optimist, she said, reaching for her water glass, since I've already made a fool of myself, why don't you tell me an embarrassing story about yourself to even the score? Nicholas's eyes lit up at the challenge. Oh, you want embarrassing? I've got just the story for you. He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Picture this. I'm 22, fresh out of college, and I've just landed my first big job interview at a prestigious accounting firm. Jessie nodded, already intrigued. I'm nervous as hell, but I've prepared for weeks. I've got my best suit on. Navy blue, crisp white shirt, power tie. I'm feeling good, confident even. So what happened? Jessie asked, completely engrossed in the story. Nicholas's grin widened. I walk into the building, ride the elevator up to the 30th floor, and step out into this massive, intimidating lobby. There's a receptionist behind a sleek desk, and she asks me to have a seat while she lets the interviewer know I've arrived. He paused for dramatic effect, and Jessie found herself leaning forward, eager to hear more. So I sit down on this fancy leather couch, cross my legs, and re-hip. Jessie's eyes widened. No! Oh, yes, Nicholas confirmed with a nod. I split my pants right down the middle seam, and not just a little tear. We're talking a full-on Grand Canyon-sized rip. Jessie clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle her laughter. What did you do? What could I do? Nicholas shrugged, his eyes dancing with amusement. I sat there, frozen in panic, praying to every deity I could think of that the interviewer would be delayed. But of course he wasn't, Jessie guessed. Of course not, Nicholas agreed. Not 2 minutes later, this imposing man in an impeccable suit walks out and calls my name. I stood up, trying to keep my back to the wall, and awkwardly shuffled into his office like a penguin with a wedgie. By now, Jessie was shaking with silent laughter, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. I made it through the entire interview with my hand strategically placed behind my back, trying to hold the fabric together. Nicholas continued. I must have looked like I was hiding a weapon or something, because the interviewer kept giving me these suspicious looks. Did you get the job? Jessie asked, wiping away a tear. Nicholas shook his head ruefully. Shockingly, no. But I did get a very polite rejection letter that praised my unique interview style. Jessie burst into laughter, no longer able to contain herself. The sound was loud and unrestrained, drawing curious glances from nearby diners, but she didn't care. Nicholas joined in, his deep chuckle harmonizing with her giggles. As their laughter subsided, Jessie felt a warmth spreading through her chest. Nicholas had a way of making her feel completely at ease, of turning potentially awkward moments into shared jokes. It was a quality she'd never encountered in anyone else she'd dated. Thank you, she said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Nicholas's fingers intertwined with hers, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. For what? For being you, Jessie replied. For knowing exactly how to make me feel better. A tender smile spread across Nicholas's face, his eyes locked on hers. That's what I'm here for. The moment stretched between them, charged with an electricity that made Jessie's skin tingle. She found herself getting lost in Nicholas's warm brown eyes, noticing for the first time the flecks of gold that danced in their depths. The spell was broken by the arrival of their waiter, a young man with a neatly trimmed beard and a crisp white shirt. Can I interest you in dessert this evening? Jessie reluctantly withdrew her hand from Nicholas's, clearing her throat. What do you think? She asked, glancing at her date. Nicholas's eyes never left her face as he addressed the waiter. What would you recommend? The waiter launched into a description of their signature chocolate lava cake, but Jessie barely heard him. She was too distracted by the way Nicholas was looking at her, like she was the only person in the room. That sounds perfect, Nicholas said when the waiter finished. We'll take 2. As the waiter departed, Jessie raised an eyebrow. Feeling indulgent tonight, are we? Nicholas leaned back in his chair, a mischievous glint in his eye. Well, I figure if you're going to fall asleep on me again, you might as well do it in a chocolate-induced coma. Jessie laughed, shaking her head. I promise to stay awake this time. Although I can't promise I won't get chocolate all over my face. I look forward to it, Nicholas replied with a wink. As they waited for their dessert, the conversation flowed easily between them. They discussed their favorite books, debated the merits of various pizza toppings, and shared stories from their childhoods. With each passing minute, Jessie felt herself falling deeper under Nicholas's spell. When the waiter returned with 2 decadent-looking chocolate lava cakes, Jessie's eyes widened. Oh, wow, she breathed, inhaling the rich aroma of cocoa. This looks amazing. Nicholas picked up his fork, his eyes twinkling. Shall we? They dug in, and Jessie couldn't help but moan at the first bite. The cake was perfectly moist, with a molten center that oozed onto her plate. Oh my God, she mumbled around her mouthful. This is heavenly. Nicholas nodded in agreement, his own eyes closed in bliss. I think I've found my new religion, he joked. The Church of Chocolate Lava Cake. Jessie giggled, taking another bite. As she did, a dollop of chocolate sauce escaped the corner of her mouth. Without missing a beat, Nicholas reached across the table, gently wiping away the chocolate with his thumb. The tender gesture caught Jessie off guard, and she felt her breath hitch in her throat. Nicholas's hand lingered on her face, his eyes searching hers. You had a little, he said softly, trailing off. Thanks, Jessie whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, it seemed as if Nicholas might lean in and kiss her right there in the middle of the restaurant. But then he pulled back, clearing his throat and returning his attention to his dessert. Jessie felt a mix of disappointment and relief. As much as she wanted to kiss Nicholas, and oh, did she want to? She wasn't ready for such a public display of affection. Not yet, anyway. As they finished their desserts, Jessie found herself stealing glances at Nicholas. The way his strong hands held his fork, the curve of his jaw as he chewed, the warmth in his eyes when he caught her looking. It all combined to create a picture of a man she was quickly falling for. When the bill came, Nicholas insisted on paying despite Jessie's protests. "You can get the next one," he said with a smile that made her heart flutter. The next one. The promise of future dates hung in the air between them as they left the restaurant, stepping out into the cool night air. "Can I walk you home?" Nicholas asked, offering his arm. Jessie hesitated for a moment. Her apartment was only a few blocks away, but the thought of extending their evening was tempting. "I'd like that," she said, slipping her arm through his. As they strolled down the sidewalk, Jessie found herself hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. The warmth of Nicholas's body next to hers, the gentle pressure of his arm against hers, the way their steps fell into sync. It all felt so natural, so right. They chatted about nothing and everything as they walked, their laughter echoing off the buildings around them. All too soon, they arrived at Jessie's apartment building. "This is me," she said, reluctantly disentangling herself from Nicholas's arm. Nicholas looked up at the building, then back at Jessie. "I had a wonderful time tonight," he said softly. "So did I," Jessie replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for everything." They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken words and unfulfilled desires. Jessie found herself leaning in slightly, her body acting of its own accord. Nicholas seemed to sense her hesitation. He pulled her into a warm embrace. Jessie melted into his arms, breathing in his scent, a mix of cologne and something uniquely him. When they pulled apart, Nicholas pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Good night, Jessie," he murmured. "Good night, Nicholas," she replied, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. As she watched him walk away, Jessie felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost overwhelmed her. She fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking slightly as she unlocked the door to her building. Once inside her apartment, Jessie leaned against the closed door, her heart racing. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this way about someone. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. As she got ready for bed, replaying the evening's events in her mind, Jessie came to a decision. It was time to tell Nicholas her secret. She couldn't keep it from him any longer, not when she was feeling this way. With trembling fingers, she picked up her phone and typed out a text. "Can we meet tomorrow? There's something I need to tell you." Nicholas's reply came almost immediately. "Of course. Is everything okay?" Jessie took a deep breath before responding. "Everything's fine. I just need to share something important with you. Coffee at 2. "I'll be there," Nicholas texted back. "Good night, beautiful?" Jessie's heart fluttered at the endearment. She fell asleep that night with a mix of anticipation and anxiety swirling in her chest. The next day, Jessie arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, her stomach in knots. She ordered a latte and found a quiet table in the corner, nervously fiddling with the sleeve on her cup. At exactly 2 o'clock, Nicholas walked in. He spotted her immediately, a warm smile spreading across his face as he made his way over. "Hey," he said, taking the seat across from her. "Is everything all right? Your text had me a little worried." Jessie took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Everything's fine, I promise. There's something I need to tell you." Nicholas reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You can tell me anything, Jessie. What's going on?" She looked down at their intertwined fingers, drawing strength from his touch. "Do you know about my 6th date rule?" Nicholas's brow furrowed in confusion. "I can't say that I do." Jessie nodded, having expected as much. "It's something I came up with a few years ago. On the 6th date, I always share something about myself that might be, well, potentially awkward or off-putting. If the person can't handle it, then I don't move on to a 7th date." Understanding dawned in Nicholas's eyes. "And this is our 6th date?" "Yes," Jessie confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. Nicholas squeezed her hand gently. "Jessie, whatever it is, I want you to know that it won't change how I feel about you." His words gave her the courage to continue. "I hope you mean that," she said, taking another deep breath. "Because what I have to tell you is, well, it's pretty big." Nicholas waited patiently, his thumb tracing soothing circles on the back of her hand. Jessie closed her eyes, gathering her thoughts. When she opened them again, she looked directly into Nicholas's warm brown eyes. "I was born a boy," she said softly. For a moment, silence hung between them. Jessie held her breath, searching Nicholas's face for any sign of shock or disgust. But his expression remained unchanged, his eyes still filled with warmth and affection. "I know," he said simply. Jessie blinked, sure she had misheard him. "You know?" Nicholas nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I've known for a while now." "But how?" Jessie asked, her mind reeling. "Did someone tell you?" Nicholas chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No one told me. You did." Jessie's confusion deepened. "What? When?" "Remember our last date? The movie night at my place?" Nicholas asked. Jessie nodded slowly. They had watched a classic film noir curled up on Nicholas's couch. She had dozed off towards the end, her head resting on his shoulder. "Well," Nicholas continued, "you talk in your sleep." Realization dawned on Jessie, and she felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "Oh, God!" she groaned. "What did I say?" Nicholas's smile widened. "You mumbled something about being born in the wrong body and how you were so happy to be your true self now. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together." Jessie buried her face in her free hand, mortified. "I can't believe this. Why didn't you say anything?" Nicholas gently pulled her hand away from her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Because it wasn't my place to bring it up. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." Jessie searched his face, looking for any sign of judgment or hesitation. She found none. "And you're okay with it?" Nicholas's expression softened. "Jessie, I'm more than okay with it. You're an incredible woman. Smart, funny, beautiful inside and out. The journey you took to become who you are today doesn't change that. If anything, it makes me admire you even more." Tears welled up in Jessie's eyes, threatening to spill over. "You have no idea how much it means to hear you say that," she whispered. Nicholas stood up, moving around the table to sit next to her. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I'm honored that you trusted me enough to share this with me," he said softly. "And I want you to know that it doesn't change how I feel about you, not one bit." Jessie leaned into him, allowing herself to be enveloped in his warmth. For so long she had feared this moment, the moment of revelation, of potential rejection. But here she was, wrapped in the arms of a man who knew her deepest secret and still looked at her with nothing but affection and acceptance. "So," she said, her voice muffled against his chest, "I guess this means we can have a 7th date?" Nicholas laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I'd say it's a safe bet," he replied. They sat like that for a while, ignoring the curious glances from other patrons in the coffee shop. Jessie felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a future with Nicholas by her side. As they eventually left the coffee shop, hand in hand, Jessie felt a sense of peace wash over her. She knew there would be challenges ahead. There always were in any relationship. But with Nicholas, she felt ready to face whatever came their way. "So," Nicholas said as they strolled down the sidewalk, "now that the big reveal is out of the way, what should we do for our 7th date?" Jessie pretended to think hard, tapping her chin with her free hand. How about something low-key? Maybe another movie night?" Nicholas grinned. "Sounds perfect. But this time, try not to fall asleep and reveal any more secrets, okay?" Jessie laughed, playfully swatting his arm. "I'll do my best, but no promises. You make a very comfy pillow." As they continued their walk, planning their next date and sharing easy banter, Jessie felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had taken a risk, opened her heart, and found acceptance and love in return. Whatever the future held, she knew that this moment, walking hand in hand with Nicholas, feeling truly seen and accepted, was one she would cherish forever. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of dates, laughter, and deepening emotions. Jessie and Nicholas fell into an easy rhythm, spending most of their free time together. They explored the city, trying new restaurants and visiting museums. They had quiet nights in, cooking dinner together and curling up on the couch to watch movies or play board games. With each passing day, Jessie found herself falling harder for Nicholas. It wasn't just his acceptance of her past that drew her to him. It was his kindness, his wit, the way he always seemed to know exactly what she needed, whether it was a comforting hug or a silly joke to make her laugh. One evening, about 2 months into their relationship, they were sprawled on Jessie's couch, the remains of a homemade pizza on the coffee table in front of them. Jessie's head rested in Nicholas's lap as he absent-mindedly played with her hair.
"Can I ask you something?"
Nicholas said, his voice soft in the dimly lit room. Jessie tilted her head to look up at him. Of course. Nicholas seemed to hesitate for a moment, his fingers stilling in her hair.
"When did you know? That you were a woman, I mean."
Jessie sat up slowly, turning to face him. She had been expecting this question, but it still made her heart race a little. "It's not a simple answer," she began. "I think on some level I always knew. Even as a little kid, I felt different, out of place in my own skin." Nicholas nodded encouragingly, his eyes full of warmth and genuine interest. "But I didn't have the words for it then," Jessie continued. "It wasn't until I was in high school that I started to understand what I was feeling. I came across an article about transgender individuals, and suddenly everything clicked into place. It was like finding the missing piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my whole life." She paused, lost in memories for a moment. Nicholas took her hand, squeezing it gently. "It wasn't an easy journey," Jessie said softly. "Coming out to my family, starting hormone therapy, going through surgery. It was all incredibly challenging. But it was also the most freeing experience of my life. For the first time, I felt like I was truly myself." Nicholas brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you for sharing that with me," he murmured. "You're incredibly brave, you know that?" Jessie felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "I don't know about brave," she said. "I just did what I had to do to be happy." "That's exactly what makes you brave," Nicholas insisted. "You had the courage to be true to yourself, no matter how difficult it was." Jessie leaned in, resting her forehead against Nicholas's. "Thank you," she whispered, "for listening, for understanding, for everything." Nicholas cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "I love you, Jessie," he said softly. "All of you." Jessie's breath caught in her throat. It was the first time either of them had said those words. She searched Nicholas's eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and affection. "I love you too," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. As they settled back into the couch, Jessie curled into Nicholas's side, her head resting on his chest. She could hear the steady beat of his heart, a comforting rhythm that seemed to sync with her own.
"You know,"
Nicholas said after a while, his voice rumbling in his chest, "I've been thinking about what you said about your 6th date rule." Jessie tilted her head to look up at him. "Oh." Nicholas nodded, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I think it's only fair that I share something potentially awkward about myself, too." Jessie sat up, intrigued. "All right, I'm listening." Nicholas took a deep breath, his expression suddenly serious. I'm a diehard fan of pineapple on pizza." For a moment, Jessie just stared at him. Then she burst out laughing, playfully shoving his shoulder. "You jerk! I thought you were going to tell me something serious." Nicholas grinned, pulling her back into his arms.
"Hey, pineapple on pizza is a very divisive issue. I've seen relationships end over less
Jessie shook her head, still chuckling. Well, I suppose if I can accept you despite this grievous character flaw, our love must be true.
See? I knew you were the one for me,
Nicholas said. As their laughter subsided, Jessie found herself marveling at how easy it was with Nicholas, how she could go from sharing deeply personal experiences to laughing at silly jokes in the span of minutes. It was a level of comfort and intimacy she had never experienced before. Hey, she said softly, looking up at him. Thank you for making me feel safe enough to be completely myself with you.
Nicholas's expression softened. Thank you for trusting me with your true self, he replied. I promise to always honor that trust.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.